it's season 2, episode 17.
I can't even believe that we're here.
Of Queer Gals Watch The West Wing, and indeed The West Wing. Looking at the episode of The West Wing, the Stackhouse Filibuster.
Leigh, I'm thrilled. How are you feeling?
I will say, this was a crazy ep.
Yeah, it's bringing a very dynamic energy, shall we say.
This episode and last episode, I feel we're really kind of playing with form. They're slightly different tonally to what we've had for the rest of season 2.
Which I honestly feel has been a gift for us queer gals.
Yeah,
you know?
It's kind of been like, we're in a dreamscape, you know? I don't know why, but that's just the vibe I get.
Yeah. And do you know what? Another thing that I recognize when we have these episodes is that our voices go insane.
I am unfortunately unable to discuss my voice in this podcast because it makes me realize that like every comment I've gotten about stand-up of being like, you're quite shrill. The voice is actually quite grating. I'm like, I hear it now. Yeah.
I just think that like, because I get so excited about the show, I've become incredibly performative and therefore my accent is just bonkers. And I don't understand the phraseologies that I'm using. But
mildly concerned about is a listener did get in touch to say they've been listening to the podcast, an American listener, they've been listening to the podcast to work on their British accent for a play.
No. I wouldn't take my... actually, I suppose mine's probably pretty standard.
London has beaten the West Country out of you, I think, at this point, sadly.
Oh, there's nothing left. Yeah. The sweet Somerset girl that was once there, she's gone now. She was bullied out by the Southeast.
Shall we get into the Stackhouse Filibuster fee?
Yeah, this is just more something for me to discuss with my therapist. Okay, so the Stackhouse Filibuster, season 2, episode 17 of The West Wing. Mm-hmm. I'm excited by the title. I love a filibuster. Mm-hmm. And Leigh, I know what a filibuster is.
Wow, love that for you.
And do you know why I know? I know thanks to Parks and Recreation and Leslie Knope.
A show that I've always been meaning to get into.
Okay, I'm gonna give my hot take on this as a concept.
Okay.
Because we all have shows where we're like, oh my God, I really should watch that. Or like, I started watching it, I just didn't really get into it. When people say, no, just get through the first season, don't. If it's not for you, it's not for you. I tried to watch Breaking Bad and I was like, I understand that this is a good show. Mm-hmm. I don't want to watch it. That's
kind of how I felt about Ozark. I was just like, I just know it's not for me. I can appreciate that it's like, obviously, world-class television making.
Yeah.
But I'm just not looking, I realize I'm saying this on a podcast about the West Wing, but I'm just not looking for that level of stakes.
No, I just think it's okay to like what you like. And at the end of the day, like, I started watching Parks and Rec and was immediately on board. Mm-hmm. Even though the first season, like, they are finding their feet. I just think when people tell you just get through, I'm like, well, I don't think you need to commit like 20 episodes to a TV show if you're not sure you're going to enjoy it. Because there'll be something else that you do immediately like.
Although I will say, that was the way with Schitt's Creek for me, was it took me a couple of runs up at it. But then by the time I got to the midpoint of season 2, I was hooked.
Yeah. I think it just shows that a lot of the time you need a day of streaming, you know? Hit some episodes back to back. Because I can't imagine now, like, watching TV if it was being released weekly, ever being able to get into a show.
How would you follow the storylines? That was a point that somebody made to me with regards our show actually recently, was that like the reason why there's no kind of continuing storylines in the first season is because it was obviously network television back in the day. People were kind of only tuning in some weeks, not every week. And therefore, The West Wing was kind of boundary breaking when it did start to have multi-episode arcs. Because most shows at the time didn't have them.
Well, that makes so much more sense.
Yeah. But shall we dive into the spicy previously on for this episode?
Very re-election heavy.
Hoynes is back, bitch.
Yes.
I feel a primary challenge coming on.
And like, we clocked this from the previously on. And I borderline resent that everyone acts like they're freaking clueless about this until the last 3 minutes of this episode.
Are you meaning to tell me that Toby Ziegler has not foreseen that Hoynes basically has like Lady Macbeth levels of ambition and
Lee,
simply
you couldn't
will
have
not
put it
be
better.
stopped until he is president.
He will not be stopped. I'd just like to say we open this episode once again with establishing shots of DC and a lovely voiceover of CJ just addressing her father.
Was not prepared for the episode to open with a dear dad from CJ.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, is this episode going to be structured like Celestial Navigation, but from CJ's perspective, perhaps? But then, of course, we learn as we go on that it is kind of more of a multivocal situation.
I love the structure for this episode because it's very sweet but very silly.
It's quite saccharine for the West Wing, I feel.
It really is.
We're really leaning into like a montage of DC landscapes to open and close at the moment.
Which I kind of really love because I suppose there's so many episodes where we just like never go outside.
Yeah.
So it's just nice to be like, Lee, to reference you last week talking about Hadestown, it's showing us where we are. It's showing us when we are. It's grounding us. It's grounding us. So someone is filibustering.
Mm-hmm.
And they are filibustering by reading aloud a recipe book.
Yes.
Which is such a fun filibuster choice. Everyone's kind of mad about the filibustering. So obviously waiting on a vote to happen. And that is why someone is doing a filibuster. Sam is mad because he's going to miss the shuttle and therefore getting to his Frank Lloyd Wright house where he's spending the weekend. Now,
of course, Sam is an architecture nut. I so see this for him, that he's just an absolute slut for architecture.
Now, I don't know if this is a joke or not, but like there's some reference to like, oh, is it cold in the Hamptons at the moment? And Sam Seaborn just says, we wear sweaters. It's a Tommy Hilfiger ad.
I love this kind of self-effacing moment from Sam.
But I'm like, who are all these men that you're going away with for the weekend to a house that is like an Architectural Digest kind of dream house? Like, that's a gay weekend. Like, we're going to the Hamptons to stay in like a house of architectural significance with a group of my male friends. And we're all going to wear sweaters. Like, I'm sorry, but is that just like the video of a Last Christmas?
Whenever we reference Sam and like his wet weather gear for sailing and generally his activities in New England, it always is so deeply homoerotic.
Yeah, yeah. Like it's like I'm really expecting him to be like, because, you know, me and my boyfriend love sailing.
Now, I've never actually been to New England. So, dear listener, do let us know, is New England a particularly homoerotic place?
Well, like...
It has a reputation, I know, for being preppy.
Well, again, all of the information that I know about New England, and specifically the Hamptons, is gleaned from Sex and the City.
And Gilmore Girls, indeed.
And Gilmore Girls. England. So if there are any New Englandites listening...
New Englanders, if you will.
New Englanders. Drop us a line. Let us know what the vibe is.
Let us know the vibes, yeah.
I would like to just have a small moment for CJ referring to the lads, to her dad, as her spin boys.
Obsessed, because they have treated CJ on several occasions like their employee. So I love that CJ is like giving as good as she gets there, you know.
They're my spin boys.
Mm-hmm.
Josh is upset because he wants to go somewhere. I can't remember where. Is it Florida? I'm not sure.
Florida, yeah.
He wants to go to Florida because the Mets are having their training camp down there and he's got like a ticket to go and watch them.
So lame.
And he's like, I want to go there and I want like one of the particular Mets players to like call me dude. And CJ's like, well, I wouldn't want you to miss a legitimate dude sighting.
I know that CJ is like messing with him when she pretends not to know what the sport is, but I genuinely was not clear for the whole episode about whether we were talking about basketball, baseball, or football.
Yeah, but that's understandable because we don't care.
Yeah.
And I think all of it's very lame. But cute, you know. So CJ's going in to talk to the press corps. All the press corps are like, we want to go home. We've got our like late night deadlines. Mm-hmm. We've got to get these stories done. Like, what's happening with this filibuster? And CJ's just kind of on fire, really. She's
really riffing. She's having a great time. I'm also screaming at a particular exchange she has with one reporter where he's like, CJ, it's Friday night. I was supposed to have dinner with my girlfriend. She's going to kill me. And
yeah, but you know what, Mark? This is just the kind of thing that can cleanse the palate of a relationship that's gone stale. Like a fine sorbet. And she's like, how long have you been together? And he's like, 3 weeks. And she just says, ditch her if she's being like this after 3 weeks.
A rare kind of misogynist moment from CJ there.
I mean, I'm kind of with her. It's like if you were dating someone for 3 weeks, they're a member of the White House press corps, which we have found out from our study sessions is a very like demanding job. And you're like, but we had dinner plans. I'm really fucking pissed with you. Not the right vibe.
No.
Toby, unsurprisingly, is like, I want to go home. And then we finally get CJ explaining that she would also like to be home because she's supposed to be going to Napa for her dad's 70th.
So does this mean that CJ is, in fact, a Northern California girly by birth? No, she said at one point she was from Ohio, did she not?
I mean, Napa would be a lovely place to go for a 70th.
It would also potentially be a lovely place to retire.
Yes, potential.
The wine.
Bit of warm weather, wine.
Gorge, yeah.
Anyway, so I think CJ wins, and that is why she's emailing her father, because she's emailing him to be like, I'm really sorry that I can't come. It seems like this filibuster is going to keep going. We find out that the senator who's doing the filibuster is Minnesota Senator Howard Stackhouse.
Love.
But let's find out about the Family Wellness Act. Because it's timely to travel back in time.
On a journey.
So there's been a lot of work happening with the team around the Family Wellness Act. And we kind of jump into the past, into a conversation in the Roosevelt room where we're like kind of polishing off the last bits before we're going to send it to vote. And one of the things that's kind of going to hit the cutting room floor is obviously like women's health.
Of course, as always.
And in CJ's words, she's like, yes, I will once again betray the sisterhood. I saw you, and you roll your eyes.
You weren't even looking at me.
I felt you. Just don't cross CJ Cregg, you know?
I love also just like men openly rolling their eyes at feminism as a concept.
At women's access to health.
The year is truly 2001.
Yeah.
It was a dark time.
Yeah. Josh gets a little round of applause.
Love him getting his flowers before any votes have been cast.
And then just a little plot point. Aside from this, Toby's handling an issue surrounding like oil and fuel prices, and like Hoynes' name has been dropped into that. So like that's little Toby's little thing that he's got this week. But to the cat.
I say, as the cat is truly basking in the sun next to me, like an Egyptian god.
Speaking of Egyptian gods, Dad, this would be a good time to mention that an Egyptian cat goddess named Bast has put an ancient curse on me. So, there was a trip to Cairo.
Which I frankly would have loved to have seen.
We've been robbed of, frankly.
West Wing meets Murder on the Nile.
Yeah, honestly, where is Hercule Poirot?
I honestly feel like Hercule Poirot and Jed Bartlett would get on like a house on fire.
Hey, I like that little Belgian guy, you know? So while on this trip to Cairo, Jed was gifted a ceramic cat statue, which was of the goddess Bast, and that CJ has potentially lost said statue. And the dignitary from Egypt is coming to the White House, and so we need to display the gift. More on this later. We must go to the sisterhood actually being very strong.
Yeah.
What do you need?
Some information, possibly a disguise, and a fast getaway car. Come inside. Which is CJ's way of summoning Carol into her office. Be still, Carol's beating heart.
Carol's like, basically like, it's very... The reference I was going to give then was absolutely crackers. I was going to say it's like that bit in, I'm not sure if it's Frozen 1 or Frozen 2.
Not a place I expected us to go this morning.
Where Anna is like heading somewhere, and is it Kristoff is like, instead of coming in and being like, I'm going to save you, just says, what do you need? And I remember both of us watching this probably in a deep depression at some point and being like, that's what men should be like. That's true love.
I think we'd split a bottle of wine.
Yeah. And so that for me was Carol being Kristoff. What do you need?
What do you need? And then my theory at this point was that CJ had given Carol the statue because Carol and her girlfriend love cats.
Oh dear. I need to get back on track. Honestly, this has gone absolutely into the deep end. Toby and Hoynes.
I love that we find Hoynes once again giving a random photo op.
Just with some elderly women and their quilts. The first line he says is, beautiful quilts. It's so funny. It's so good. It's so clever. It's such clever writing because you're like, he's so harmless. He's so useless. But is he?
He's a slippery little snake.
He's a slippery little snake in the grass. So Hoynes has just finished doing this photo op and he's like, oh yeah, Toby, actually, do you know what? I know you've got this like oil problem thing. I'm actually doing another press conference tomorrow. So like, why don't I just open it up to the press? Because they'll ask me a question about it. Don't get the like particular cabinet member that's supposed to speak on this. I'll do it. Because I'm a cool guy. I'm a pretty cool guy.
I'll come through for you. You know, I'm a bro.
Now, we need to talk about this scene because Toby hates Hoynes.
Toby hates Hoynes with the passion of 1,000 suns.
Unadulterated loathing.
He is Elphaba in this moment.
Yeah.
To Hoynes is Glinda.
Yes. Toby says, would you mind if I prepared some notes for you? And Hoynes says, not at all. Would you mind if I shoved them up your ass? I feel like that's not how we should talk to people. We're left with the worry that despite the fact that he's normally very pro-oil company, Hoynes is going to crack down on the oil companies in this press conference.
Yeah.
And
What's he
Toby
up to?
is confused. And Leigh and I like, obviously it's a play.
He wants to get in the spotlight to raise his profile.
Exactly.
Have a little hero moment.
Exactly. He wants it all to be about him. We find out at this point that Stackhouse has been filibustering for 8 hours. He is 78 years old and has a heavy head cold.
What an absolute ledge.
Yeah. Late night in the mess.
Mm-hmm.
At this point, Stackhouse has stopped reading the recipe book and has just started reading aloud David Copperfield.
Absolutely screaming that Sam Seaborn is a Dickens fangirly.
Sam Seaborn is just sat in the mess with like a little cup of coffee, playing solitaire on his laptop and listening to Stackhouse read David Copperfield aloud.
Sounds like a lovely evening.
Honestly, don't hate it. I bet Sam Seaborn loves an audiobook.
Yeah. I think he has to listen to a little audiobook to get to sleep at night.
Yeah, of an
He's just
evening.
like there listening to Sense and Sensibility, being like, Marion.
With an eye mask on. So the thing that I enjoyed even more than him saying Dickens was his favourite writer was when CJ said, who's your favourite writer? He immediately, without a breath, was like, Toby Ziegler.
And she's like, a fiction, you freak.
Then there's a little thing where CJ's like, hey, I heard you got like basically like outfoxed by an intern from like basically like an auditing department. And he's just like, she was very crafty. And I enjoy that we keep getting references to Sam being like outplayed by like very young women in very junior roles.
Because he's too earnest for his own good.
Exactly. And at that point, CJ's like, I'm writing an email to my dad. And Sam's like, huh. And then he starts writing an email to his dad. And therefore, he takes the mantle of narrator from this point.
The hallmark of it all.
It's very Hallmark, but also like I really enjoy it. But part of me was like, this is exactly the kind of like lock-in episode where we could be pursuing personal storylines. Josh and Donna, Sam and Ainsley, CJ and Danny. These are the moments for indulging in crushes, for secret kissing to begin.
Dare I say, I feel as though a gulf has grown, I feel, between Donna and Josh since Joey Lucas alluded to Donna's feelings a few episodes ago.
Yes. We'll come back. There's a scene that I think really kind of nails that on the head. So let's come back to that because I am very intrigued. So we're taking it in turns to celestial navigation ourselves, basically.
I, at this point, am like, am I having a fever dream? Because Sam starts talking about how the kind of inciting incident for him in this episode is that he was looking for a piece of fruit.
Yes. So when he goes into the past, he's like, oh, it was a meeting where Josh was basically like handing out assignments to everyone. And he went into Josh's office to find some good fruit, which is completely correct for Sam Seaborn, but crazy. Josh is obviously handing out these assignments to like members of his team, his junior team. And Sam's like, I'd like that one, please.
Mhm.
You have work to do, Sam. You have a very important job. But anyway, he's given this job of saving money by cutting certain reports that are being done about things.
Mhm.
That doesn't sound like a very good descriptor, but that's all I've got at
Well,
this
it's
point.
like, let's cut the meaningless bureaucracy of government reports
Yes.
and cut it down to the vital ones. Less hours of labor, etc. Let's
Yes.
streamline.
The kind of room is dismissed, and Josh is like, cool, like, go for it with this assignment. And Sam says, that's my nickname. I'm the housekeeper. To Winifred Hooper.
What a gal with the most 2001 fringe that has ever fringed.
Yes. So Winifred is the intern that schooled Sam.
Yeah.
So Sam is in this meeting basically being like, cut this, cut that, cut this. Yeah, we don't need that. We don't need that. Winifred is just pushing in a little trolley with all these files on and just openly tutting and like tusking at him like a senior White House member of staff. And she's just like, oh my God. Oh God.
With all of the like judgment and condescension of like an Irish grandmother.
Yes. And he's like, I'm sorry, can I help you? And she says, no, you seem to be screwing up the world all by yourself. Yes. Come through. Wild behavior from an intern. He says, shall I call you Winnie? And she says, not unless you want me to spit at you.
This is how Aaron Sorkin perceives 19-year-old women. It's truly fascinating. There's a real fear there. You can sense almost kind of a phobia.
I think he's scared of young women.
Which, honestly, being afraid of teenage girls is only a sensible thing.
Yes, they're some of the most terrifying people alive. But in conclusion, a heartwarming and enjoyable scene. Because basically Winifred's like, you don't know what you're talking about. I've read every single one of these reports. They let me come in early and they let me leave late because I like reading and I've read all the reports. And you can just see Sam being like, wow, I like reading too. I really respect you.
Mm-hmm.
I may rethink some of my choices based on the information you have provided me. Success all round. Let's move back to CJ and this ceramic cat.
With the greatest moment in this TV show thus far for me, which is CJ narrating by saying, I was in trouble and I needed someone to tell, a cohort, someone whose criminal mind was equal to my own. Cut to Donna Moss. Yet again in this episode, am I high?
It's the hijinks are out of control. But then what we get is a CJ and Donna explainer where we're walking down the hall.
Love,
which is
love
very
this.
enjoyable.
Love that CJ is getting to do some explain. Because remember, we had that episode where, like, obviously Donna had her classic Donna explainer with Josh, and then CJ was also wanting an explainer from Sam. And it was like, why are all of these women here just to be explained to?
Yes.
So is this growth? I think it is.
So the news is that the cat was handed to CJ along with some t-shirts and a box of baklava by the person who's like the gifts officer, who's basically supposed to be in charge of gifts. CJ threw it in her suitcase and it broke. And she's like, I'm screwed. I say, call Bernard. He'll know someone who works in antiques who can fix that.
Yeah.
Obviously, he'll give you a dressing down first.
Completely. Yeah.
And be like, I don't know what you were thinking.
And insult
What
your
on
hair.
earth were you thinking, Claudia Jean, with that haircut and this cat? But he would know someone. He would have a friend. But back to Stackhouse and who it was that missed the threat of the filibuster.
Now, this is the scene where I noted a significant cooling off I felt between Josh and Donna.
Yeah. I think he's just pretending to himself that what Joey said never happened and kind of avoiding Donna. But then when she's like, is everything okay? Being like, yeah, why? Why wouldn't it be okay?
Gaslighter, in the words of the chicks.
Yeah. There's a bit of that going on. And maybe it comes around to bite him in the ass. Would you like to be Josh or Donna?
I'll be Josh. I'm feeling my masculinity today.
Gorgeous. Okay. Did Senator Stackhouse ask you to meet with one of his aides?
Yes.
Because I don't have it down.
Yeah, I'm not taking it.
Why?
He wants an amendment added to the Family Wellness Act that will allocate funding for autism care and research.
And we don't want to.
This is what's called a Christmas tree bill. Everyone hangs amendments on it. We just closed it this morning. We try and hang a star on top.
The tree topples over and it doesn't pass.
Stackhouse isn't really someone who has a lot of muscle in this, so.
You got this phone message?
From his office?
From him. You're gonna meet with me or there's not gonna be a vote while I'm alive. Stackhouse. I would say, maybe don't underestimate Stackhouse.
Truly.
Take the meeting. Give the fella the time of day. He clearly wants to be heard, and I would say that would be good politics.
But
who
know.
am I, Leigh? Who am I? I'm just a simple gal from across the sea who knows very little about anything.
We all know there are some senators, indeed politicians in every nation out there who are older than dust, and we may begin to feel are slightly irrelevant. However, I believe that is, an ageist view, and ultimately they are there for a reason. Now, is that reason sometimes nepotism and kind of privilege? Yes, it is. But other times it's due to a genuine political zeal that has not
been given the level of respect that it might deserve.
Yes, and has not been diluted based on the number of years of service they have given.
I think political zeal is a very enjoyable phrase.
Thank you.
So it's now Josh's turn to narrate. But he's talking to his mom, obviously.
Which was cute. And I love that we didn't necessarily reveal that it was the mom for a while. I was like, is it like a sibling? What's going on here?
Yeah. And incidentally also coincides with him doing an excellent pratfall in some new shoes, which I did need.
I will say Bradley Whitford really does give a stunning pratfall.
He's a very good physical comic.
He never lets us down, does he?
Yeah. What's gorgeous about it is that he always walks it off like Josh Lyman would walk it off. It's like, it doesn't matter if he's getting smashed with a door or like sitting down on a chair that isn't there or slipping over on the floor. He's getting up and being like, yeah, like no one saw that. Like I didn't even fall, which is very Josh Lyman.
Yeah.
Gorgeous work. Thank you, Bradley. Now we go and see Stackhouse. I low-key am a big fan of Stackhouse.
Yeah, I love, as you say, that he's not in awe of Josh. I feel like Josh always speaks to every other politician who's not President Bartlett as though they want to be president and would be if they could. Whereas I feel like the energy that Stackhouse is giving is like, no, I came to Washington to be a legislator. I have absolutely no interest in the executive office.
That's really interesting because after he finishes this meeting, there's some you can hear some kind of audio from a newsreader. Stackhouse he ran for president. So that's one of the other reasons where I'm like, Josh, why are you underestimating this guy? He's obviously been in Washington for so long that since whenever he did his presidential race, he's been a legislator. This is a senior senator. This isn't someone who's just come into this role. Like you say, he's as old as dust.
This isn't like a rookie congressman.
No. I love that instead of dismissing Josh, Stackhouse just walks out of his own office
and says, I'm done with you now.
That's great. And I think really good for Josh.
I will endeavor to be leaving more rooms in that way in future.
I'm done with you now. Donna checks in. And then what does Josh type into his email, Leigh?
Donna says, hi, Mom. This is my new Roman Empire. Now, of course, it's possible that her knowledge of Donna is due to the fact that, Donna may be coordinating Josh's both personal and professional diary. That makes sense. But in order for it to be the level of Donna says hi, that feels like there's a personal knowledge of Donna for Mrs. Lyman that goes beyond the simply scheduling capacity. What has he said to his mother about Donna?
Yeah, so for me, this is in the same vein as what we were talking about last week with Donna's relationship with Sam, which is Mrs. Lyman obviously would have come to the hospital post-shooting, and therefore, I think Donna would have been there to greet her and be like, Leigh is unwell. Did you not think this?
I just think I'm maybe not as smart as you think.
Absolutely untrue. I would say that she would be like, hi, Mrs. Lyman, my name's Donna Moss. We've shared some emails around, Josh's
You're
Christmas
so right.
clips. Yeah,
you're so right. As Mrs. Lyman, Donna would be the one to be like, I've got the official word on how he's doing, but how is he really doing?
Yeah. So I think Donna would have been making daily calls to Mrs. Lyman while Josh was in hospital and probably while he was at home.
I would be fascinated to meet the woman who raised Josh Lyman.
I really hope we meet her at some point. But yeah, that was my hot take. I think they met when Josh was recuperating. And I think that they probably didn't perhaps have like a personal closeness, but they were talking on the phone very regularly. And like, I think it just surprised Josh one time when he rang his mum and she was like, and how is Donna? What a lovely young woman.
I imagine that Josh has quite a freshing mother, and therefore potentially Donna was on the other end of the phone as Mrs. Lyman was saying something along the lines of, now he doesn't eat well, so make sure he needs to be eating well in order to recuperate, and he needs to be getting his veggies.
Yeah.
Pulses, Donna. He needs pulses in his diet.
Lentils. I foresee Mrs. Lyman also being as sharp as a tack, and I think her being like, oh, so how long have you been in love with my son? Whether she said it out loud, she knew.
Having a cocktail with the girlies and being like, well, I just think she takes more of a professional interest in my son.
Yeah. And, I don't think that Mrs. Lyman would ever think that Donna wasn't good enough for Josh. I just think that she thinks these kids are crazy that they're not talking about it. Anyway, should we go to a perplexing scene about French food with Jed and Leo?
Please.
So this was the scene where I was considering whether or not I was high. I was like, is this actually happening? Or like, have I ingested something that is causing me to hallucinate? So a French chef is visiting the White House.
Yes.
And it's a particular French chef that Bartlett loves. And he is cooking Jed a meal.
Yes. Now, Jed's enthusiasm over this French chef made me think that I think Jed Bartlett in the present day would be a MasterChef super fan and would backseat cook while watching the show.
Yes. So Bartlett comes into Leo's office and is like, look, this chef's here. He's doing this amazing meal. Why don't you come and have some dinner? Like, the filibuster is still going. Like, nothing's happening. Stackhouse he's not tiring. Jed then goes through like each of the dishes and Leo's like, of course I know what that elaborate French dish is. And then it gives facts about it. And it makes so much sense. I think they're both performative cooks.
Yeah, and like foodies.
Because do you remember when Donna went on her date?
I was just about to say, yeah.
And Leo was like, oh, they did this amazing thing. And like Donna's like, with respect, I had a bowl, the cheapest thing on the menu and a large cocktail. I think them talking about food is crazy.
Yeah.
And also like all of the things that they're talking about sound horrible. Now, they then discuss Stackhouse and Jed calls him a horse's patoot. Not enough people calling people horse's patoots anymore.
And I love that what he really wants to call him is a horse's ass.
Yeah, he's a horse's patoot. He's a curmudgeon and a grouchy old crank.
So are we.
You are. I'm full of mirth.
Now I can't help but see, the two like grumpy old men in the Muppets. I now can't unsee Jed and Leo as those two Muppets.
Yeah, truly. And then they walk to the dining room in the residence, and the waiter who waits on them there is like lighting 1,000 candles. It's like deeply romantic. And Jed's like, well, they thought I was eating with Abby, so let's just pretend there's no candlelight.
And that we're not paranoid homophobes.
Which I really enjoyed from Leo as a retort to
really enjoy that energy from Leo, yeah.
Because Leo's like, why shouldn't two male friends enjoy a candlelit dinner, Jed? Now, I thought that Donna would be the one to work it all out. And frankly, it's outrageous that it took until minute 32 of this 41-minute long episode for us to realize that, of course, this was a personal campaign from Senator Stackhouse. And perhaps he wanted to add the autism amendment because, of course, he has an autistic grandchild.
Yeah. Interestingly, I feel like the discussion of what was being put in the bill for kind of autism care, that language around it was really interesting to me because I feel like the whole attitude around autism has changed in the time since this episode, because in this episode we're like talking about a cure as if it's like a problem that needs to be solved, whereas for me I feel like the language so much more now would be like, actually people with autism, yes, they may struggle with some things, but there are other things that they have a unique insight and perspective on that make them really creative or like, add something to society that neurotypical people don't. And so I found that really fascinating, kind of seeing where the conversation was in 2001.
Yeah, and it makes sense as to why Stackhouse has a personal edge here. But actually, I agree. The amendment that he's putting forward, I was like, none of that would be considered relevant now.
Yeah. I mean, the stuff about like, misdiagnosis and getting diagnosis earlier, I think that's still very much relevant because like, I think it's just so much easier to put in place the kind of access support that you need when you have a diagnosis of like what makes you neurospicy,
Yeah, but with what he's discussing, adding in the amendment, there is no reference to access support there. It is kind of all surrounding like research of autism, which I suppose is still very valid, like understanding more the breadth of it. But yeah, like you say, very much like, surely there's a cure for this, which that feels very outdated.
Yeah.
That to the side, Jed and Leo are finishing dinner, and Jed's... I think we're leaning into the idea that, like, they are actually on a romantic dinner because Jed's just like, I feel like we don't talk anymore.
And he's only kind of half joking.
Yeah. But we do finally get to the conversation that we've needed for a couple of episodes where Leo's like, look, what's the plan? And Jed tells Leo about the deal that he made with Abby when he first ran for office, that it was going to be a one-time thing because of Jed's health. And so like they're kind of just getting into it. And then the information comes through that about Stackhouse and why it was a kind of personal campaign. So we're going to go and end the filibuster now.
Yeah.
A lovely kind of political phraseology from Leo here when we're all in the Oval Office and either CJ or Donna's like, I don't know why he didn't bring this up.
Yeah.
And Leo says he just didn't want to make political hay out of his grandson, which is commendable.
Love that, yeah.
And I was like, yeah, that's so true. And also, why should he have to explain that? Then Jed goes off on a crazy rant about being a grandfather. That's just like unbelievably insane. And when he stops to like pause for breath, Leo just turns to CJ and Donna and says, there was quite a lot of sugar in the creme de caramel.
I will say his rant about being a grandfather is quite rich from someone who like within quite recent memory was absolutely berated by his daughter for like not loving her.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's kind of rich. I know he does love her, but
he asked another woman why his daughter didn't like him. But we have a game plan, Leigh. And the game plan is activate the grandfathers.
Activate granddads. Jesus Christ, I was not emotionally prepared to take this turn.
But we'll have a brief step away from this for Hoynes being a slippery little bitch with Toby. So Hoynes has done this press conference and like answered all the questions and like gone in hard on Big Oil and basically like kind of shamed them. Toby's watched it and then Toby's like gone up to Hoynes and been like, oh, that was like a really interesting stance that you made because, you know, you have been critiqued in the past because you make the majority of your money from oil. So I did some digging and you, Hoynes, are kind of collecting polling data on this, and this. Like, I want to know why.
Why are we polling?
He says, what don't I know?
Toby, the total tonnage of what I know that you don't could stun a team of oxen in its tracks.
And then he just gets in a car and drives away.
It's simultaneously the most American and the most male comeback I've ever heard.
Yeah.
Like, why are we bringing oxen into it? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, like there are more well-known animals, you know? But we finished the episode watching like what's unfolding in the House, which is you don't have to end your filibuster if someone poses a question. And if they pose a question, basically they then hold the floor. And you can take a break. Because what they're like basically Stackhouse is going to die or like have like a medical emergency on his feet. Because he's been talking for like 9.5 hours at this point.
A moment for Stackhouse's wife, who's probably having a breakdown.
She is furious somewhere. I told him not to do this. And so like basically CJ and Donna and Leo and Jed are like tasked with ringing all the grandfathers in the Senate. To get them to like take it in turns to pose questions. so that Stackhouse can rest. And so what an ending. The score kicks in. It's a win for politics, a win for our team, and a win for grandfathers everywhere, Leigh.
Truly.
And that's the end of the episode.
Yeah.
End of episode recap.
Yes.
I honestly, this was an episode where I just didn't really look at best fashion at all.
Neither did I. I feel like it was kind of, especially because it was like all one day, wasn't it? So it's not like we had, we normally kind of have multiple outfit changes.
I will say that CJ was wearing a really great pantsuit in this with like a lovely silky top.
Yes.
She looked great. And I said, maybe I would give an honourable mention to the off-screen concept of Sam Seaborn's Tommy Hilfiger sweater.
It's a beautiful scene. It's a beautiful scene in our minds.
What could a British or Irish politician never get away with?
Having a candlelit dinner with their chief of staff.
Yeah. No, that's so good. Now, in our bingo card of guns, abortion, free speech, religion, etc., what do we think were the main things that came up this week?
Being a granddad.
Would we call that a big ticket item?
It is, if you believe in American family values.
Yeah, I mean,
I guess American family values is a vibe.
Yes, American. I was going to pitch for big oil, and I think potentially maybe the kind of like back of house convos that come along with re-election campaigns. You know, best rightly momently.
I was in trouble and I needed someone, a cohort, someone whose criminal mind was equal to my own. Cut to Donna Moss.
Yeah. And our man, I feel like a man.
Toby, the total tonnage of what I know that you don't could stun a team of oxen in its tracks. There's truly no debate about that for me in this episode.
It's the most masculine phrase that we hear.
Yeah. I think under the phrase toxic masculinity in the dictionary.
That's the entry.
Yeah.
And then the moment, Leigh, that made you proudest to be an American.
Grandfathers all.
Yeah. Is that from CJ?
Yeah. That's the last line of the episode.
As she's signing off the email to her dad.
Love, Claudia.
Interesting that she's Claudia to her dad and not Claudia Jean.
I think it reads though that like her family are still on the Claudia train. But professionally, she's kind of defeminized her name.
Yeah, stunning. What, Leigh, are we going to learn about?
Ooh, I wonder what it might be.
Might it be filibusters?
It will be filibusters, yes. 1939.
We begin in 1939.
Oh, we're going back further, but that's okay. We're not going chronologically today, unusually for me. 1939. A film called Mr. Smith Goes to Washington is released, directed by Frank Capra.
Yes, why have I heard of this film?
I mean, it's very famous. It angered the political establishment.
Oh.
But won much acclaim by the public and film industry. So it follows Jefferson Smith, played by James Stewart, as kind of a hooky, idealistic youth leader who ends up getting appointed to the US Senate by his state's political authorities, kind of on the assumption that he's going to be a kind of Mr. Willis of Ohio underestimating moment where they're like, you're just going to take over and we're going to be able to make you do anything we want because we think you're maybe a bit dumb. Is the vibe. Then he proposes a national youth camp on the site of a crooked land deal that he was meant to kind of just like not question. And then the state's senior senator and his kind of backers in Congress turn against him. Disillusioned, Smith nearly leaves DC with his tail between his legs, but he's persuaded by his secretary to mount a challenge to the system by giving a marathon filibuster. And in the kind of climax of the film, just to utterly spoil it for everyone, he filibusters the bill that will permit dam construction on the site of his proposed boys' camp. And the filibuster succeeds when Senator Harrison Payne confesses to his role in the crooked land deal and tries to shoot himself.
Oh my God.
Very traumatic. Now, obviously, this was not the most flattering depiction of Washington.
Not ideal.
So real-life legislators called for the film to be banned. It was called anti-American and communist because it portrayed American leaders as being corrupt. And
which couldn't ever possibly happen.
And some people, because remember, we are in 1939, some people viewed it as German Nazi propaganda.
Wow, imagine if that was the critical response to a film you'd just made.
And the US ambassador to the United Kingdom tried to suppress its release abroad. But because it was such a kind of inspiring, heartwarming film, it becomes like a box office hit and got 11 Oscar nominations.
Whoa.
Huge. And it kind of celebrated the power of democracy. And that was highlighted in 1942 when several French cinemas chose it as the final English language film to be shown before a Nazi ban was imposed.
Whoa, that's really interesting.
Really radical and stick it to the man. I love it. Now, the term filibuster is derived from the Dutch word freebooter and the Spanish filibustros to describe the pirates who raided Caribbean islands. I'm really quite unclear on what the link is there with giving a long speech to delay. But anyway.
It's kind of like a chaos tactic in a way, really.
Possibly. If any listener can enlighten us, please do let us know. And it kind of entered general American kind of political parlance in the 1850s. The first quotes of it being Mississippi's Albert Brown on January 3rd, 1853, writing, "I saw my friend standing on the other side of the house filibustering." And a month later, North Carolina Senator George Badger, great name, complained of filibustering speeches in the same year, which kind of led to it becoming a phrase that has stayed in American politics ever since. Now, a filibuster is a political strategy when a senator speaks or threatens to speak for hours on end to delay a vote on a bill. And it takes advantage of the US Senate rule that says a senator, once recognized on the floor, can speak without being interrupted. Now, various rule changes have kind of lessened the power of the filibuster over the past century, but it still gives a unique power to minority political parties in the Senate. And it actually originated with your friend and mine, Hamilton's own Aaron Burr, who declared in 1805 that the Senate shouldn't be encumbered by too many procedural rules.
Okay.
But also I kind of feel like he just loved talking away.
Oh, yeah. They all loved to chat back then, didn't they?
Yeah. There's no filibuster in the House of Representatives, however.
Okay, so it only exists in the Senate.
Yeah, because in the larger kind of legislative body, there are limits on the amount of time each representative can speak on the House floor. Now, some people praise it as a protector of political minorities from a kind of tyranny of the majority. It has also been attacked as a tool of partisan obstruction to not let anybody get anything done. Some senators find it kind of objectionable, whereas others hold really in high regard the unlimited debate as a key tradition of the Senate, which is really important for curbing the power of the majority. And, long speeches to delay action on legislation appeared in the very first session the Senate ever had. On September 22nd, 1789, Pennsylvania Senator William McClay wrote in his diary that the designs of the Virginians was to talk away the time so that we could not get the bill passed.
Oh.
I just love that the discussion of the Virginians, they're just always painted as so petty.
Yeah.
And in the 19th century, there were just more and more filibusters, and there was no formal process at that point to allow a majority to officially end debate and force a vote on legislation and nominations. So from the earliest filibusters that ever happened, there were demands from senators for what is now called cloture, which is how you bring an end to debate in the Senate. So, it kind of finally came to a head in 1841 when the Democratic minority attempted to run out the clock on a bill to establish a national bank. And the Whig Senator Henry Clay threatened to change the Senate rules to limit debate. But other people in the Senate at the time were worried that the attempt to end longer filibusters would actually end up being filibustered itself. And so William King of Alabama said, I tell the senator he may make arrangements at his boarding house for the entire winter.
I enjoy.
And this all kind of finally came to fruition in 1917 when frustration really peaked. And at the urging of President Wilson, senators adopted a rule that allowed the Senate to invoke cloture when 2/3 of the Senate voted to end debate. And that came to its first test in 1919 when the Senate invoked cloture to end the filibuster on the Treaty of Versailles.
Oh, that's so interesting that was filibustered.
Mm-hmm.
That's really interesting.
Filibusters remained really important and effective as a way to block legislation because the 2/3 threshold needed to invoke cloture was really hard to achieve. And over the next 4 decades, the Senate only was able to invoke cloture 5 times. And filibusters actually proved particularly useful to Southern senators to block civil rights legislation.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's going to be used both ways, isn't it?
Including on anti-lynching bills. And it wasn't until 1964 that the Senate actually overcame the filibuster to pass major civil rights legislation. Now, what's interesting is also we have the filibuster to thank for the Electoral College still being in place.
Really?
Because in 1969, the House of Representatives voted 338 to 70 in favor of a constitutional amendment that would have ended the Electoral College, which is a huge margin. And a 1968 Gallup poll found that 80% of Americans supported it.
George Gallup.
Yeah.
Our main man.
Our old pal.
Our old pal, George Gallup. Are you impressed I remember his name?
Yeah.
Thank you.
But in 1970, a group of Southern senators succeeded in killing that bill by filibustering it in the Senate.
Okay.
Thank you once again, the South. But then in 1975, I think largely in response to this, the votes required for cloture was brought down from 2/3 to 3/5. So it's now 60 senators are needed to invoke cloture. Now, some of the most famous filibusters from history, which is quite fun. Rand Paul in 2013 filibustered for 13 hours, reviving the tradition of talking filibusters when he was protesting US drone policy by blocking a vote on CIA Director John Brennan. He wanted concrete answers from Brennan and the administration about their drone policy and strikes. Midway through his filibuster, he said that President Obama's use of drone strikes reminded him of the story of Alice in Wonderland. Has America the Beautiful become Alice in Wonderland? He said. No, no, said the Queen. Sentence first, verdict afterwards. Basically comparing drone attacks to the Queen chopping off people's heads without a trial.
13 hours.
Now, John Brennan did eventually win confirmation. That same year, Ted Cruz, what a guy, famously filibustered by reading Dr. Seuss's Green Eggs and Ham on the Senate floor.
Not a long book.
To oppose the Affordable Care Act.
Right.
Because he hated Obama, obviously. And ever since Rand Paul's filibuster, the filibuster can no longer be used for blocking executive or judicial branch nominees. So now the filibuster can now only be used for legislation.
Which feels like the correct use of it anyway.
And that happened because in 2013, the Democrats were just so frustrated by the Republicans basically stalling all of President Obama's cabinet post and federal judge nominations. The then majority leader, Harry Reid of Nevada, cited the unbelievable, unprecedented obstruction by Senate Republicans, prompting the Senate Democrats to use the nuclear option. And that was voted in 52 to 48 along party lines to change the rules so that executive branch cabinet appointments and judicial nominations anywhere below the Supreme Court can pass with a simple majority of 51 votes. We also have in 1935, Huey P. Long filibustered for 15 hours and 30 minutes, arguing against a New Deal bill, which would have given his political enemies in Louisiana lucrative government jobs. And so he wanted to require Senate confirmation for posts within the National Recovery Administration. He's described by historians as being flamboyant and peppered his filibuster with readings from the Constitution, Shakespeare plays, and oyster recipes.
Maybe a bit of inspiration then for Aaron Sorkin there.
Yes. Wayne Moore in 1953 filibustered for 22 hours and 26 minutes.
Whoa.
In 1953, Senator Morse filibustered over Tidelands oil legislation. Just as a kind of case study, in 1922, there was the Dyer anti-lynching bill. Lynching obviously being one of the tactics that was used by white Southerners to suppress Black voters. And activists like I.W. Wells had kind of identified that connection and so included it in their campaigns to outlaw it. Congress began introducing legislation to ban lynching as early as 1901. But finally, in 1922, an anti-lynching bill passed the House of Representatives. Senate Democrats filibustered the bill in 1922, 1923, and 1924, preventing there ever being a vote on it in the chamber, and they successfully killed the bill. They also filibustered the Costigan-Wagner anti-lynching bill, which was introduced in 1934 and in 1938. And in 1938, they successfully killed the bill with a 30-day filibuster, obviously shared between multiple senators. That wasn't just one senator speaking for 30 days. And a contemporary news report said, the Senate today ended the 30-day Southern filibuster against the Wagner-Van Nuys anti-lynching bill by voting 58-22 to lay it aside to take up the $250,000 emergency relief resolutions. So it's not like it's something that's just kind of delaying the inevitable. It has successfully killed legislation that just then there's just never a vote.
Yeah, because the conclusion of this particular episode was that the filibuster was brought to a close and the vote was removed from the House floor so everyone could go home. And then they reopened the bill, basically, added a Stackhouse amendment and then took it back to the floor.
Yeah. Strom Thurmond in 1957 filibustered for 24 hours and 18 minutes.
Oh, that's so long. Like, you're not allowed to sit down. You're not allowed to eat or drink anything. You're not allowed to go to the toilet. That's insane. Like, would you just have to piss yourself?
And he did this to filibuster against the Civil Rights Act of 1957.
Okay, yeah.
Imagine being so anti-civil rights that you were prepared to do that to yourself. It's insane.
For a full day.
Yeah. He read the Declaration of Independence, the U.S. Criminal Code, and voting laws of 48 states.
Oh, God.
He prepared, apparently, by dehydrating himself in a steam room. And what I do love is that 12 hours in, Senator Paul Douglas of Illinois, hopefully a distant relative, tried to kind of speed matters along by placing a pitcher of orange juice on Thurmond's desk.
That's such a good move.
So bitchy. I love it. Thurmond drank a glass before an aide removed it from his reach.
So he did drink.
But he kept, I think at this point you were able to, but obviously he just doesn't want to have to pee.
Yeah, that's true.
He ended his 24-hour and 18-minute filibuster by concluding with the line, "I expect to vote against the bill."
Really? we couldn't have possibly been able to tell. Ludicrous individual.
Now, from the ridiculous to the sublime, Chris Murphy, a Democrat from Connecticut, filibustered to force action on gun measures in response to what was at the time the deadliest mass shooting in U.S. history in 2016. He said after his filibuster, there was nothing that was going to happen in the United States Senate, no debate in the wake of the worst mass shooting in American history until this filibuster began. That was deeply offensive to many of us.
Whoa.
He declared victory at the end of his filibuster, saying that he'd secured promises of votes on Democratic and Republican gun measures. And a little more than 12 hours after he'd finished his filibuster, Senate Republican leaders announced a vote on gun measures were set for the following Monday.
So it was a success.
To cap his speech, he presented a photo of Dylan Hockley, a 6-year-old boy who was killed in the Sandy Hook shooting. And he said, What can you do to make Orlando or Sandy Hook never, ever, ever happen again? Now, filibustering is being used as a kind of like weapon tactic more and more in an increasingly partisan Senate. So that you used to be able to pass legislation with simple majorities if it wasn't filibustered. But now almost everything is filibustered, which means that you need cloture, which is 60 votes to pass basically anything except a reconciliation bill. So obviously moderates who support the filibuster say that it promotes bipartisanship, but opponents of the filibuster say that that might have been true in a kind of bygone era, but that is kind of broken today. And so many are now calling for the end of the filibuster. Obviously, famously in 2022, Roe versus Wade was undermined by the US Supreme Court. And so before that vote happened, the Senate was trying to enshrine abortion access into federal law, but that was blocked by a Republican filibuster, basically down party lines. After the filibuster, President Joe Biden said that Republicans have chosen to stand in the way of Americans' rights to make the most personal decisions about their own bodies, families, and lives. And unfortunately, the slim majority that Democrats had in Congress in 2022 was unable to overcome the Republican filibuster. And so the vote was 51-49 against proceeding, with 60 votes needed to move ahead.
Yeah.
Which prompted, when Kamala Harris was running for president, for her to say that she would support eliminating the filibuster specifically in order to bring back federal protections for a woman's right to choose. She said, I've been very clear. I think we should eliminate the filibuster for Roe and get us to the point where 51 votes would be what we need to actually put back in law the protections for reproductive freedom and for the ability of every person and every woman to make decisions about their own body and not have their government tell them what to do.
Yeah.
However, Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell said that the Senate's supermajority threshold for passing legislation would be safe with Republicans in the majority, and that even if President-elect Donald Trump pushed to kill the filibuster, Mitch McConnell said, quote, one of the most gratifying results of the Senate becoming Republican, the filibuster will stand.
Well, let's hope that it can be used to, curb. And it won't just benefit one party, it will remain something that can provide support for both parties. So interesting.
Now, obviously, there's a lot that Trump can do in terms of giving tax breaks to the wealthy, because that's to do with reconciliation and budget. That can be passed without the filibuster. Obviously, he can make whatever appointments he wants to make to federal judges and in his own executive office that he wants with a simple majority, because that also cannot be filibustered. So let's not say that the filibuster is in any way protecting the US from whatever Donald Trump wants to do. But I think it'll be interesting to see where Donald Trump comes down on, because God knows he likes to flippity flop. So it'll be interesting to see where he kind of comes down on the issue of the filibuster in his second term, because he had previously repeatedly called for the filibuster to be eliminated. So it'll be an interesting one to watch, I think.
Oh, yeah. It's super juicy study sesh.
I will also say some really iconic female state senators also filibustered abortion bans in their states. And what an iconic thing to filibuster for.
Yeah, to stand for, quite literally, for long periods of time.
Yeah.
Amazing. Oh, I really enjoyed that, Leigh.
Well, shall we do this again next week, Fee?
Yeah, let's.
In the meantime, I have a holiday to go on.
Yeah. And you're going to the US of A.
I'm going, so help me God, to Donald Trump's own Florida. But I'm going to be with some lovely...
Into the lion's den.
I'm going to be with some lovely Floridian queers. So that should be... should be cute. But thank you so much for listening, one and all. We are at Queer Gals Watch on all the socials. Patreon.com/queergalswatch. We really appreciate everyone who supports us on there. we want to do this for as long as we can to try and cover the whole of the West Wing. And everyone who supports us on Patreon just makes this like so much more sustainable for us to keep doing and just covering our own costs, basically. Yeah. So thank you so much. I know it's also just like really fun. It's a really lovely group of people on our Patreon and on our Discord. So if you want to get in on that fun, please do check it out.
Yeah, and please get in touch. We love hearing from all of you. It gives us a lot of joy going through the email inbox, Instagram messages and hearing from people who want to listen to our deranged ramblings. But, if you feel like Patreon isn't for you, something that you could do if you wanted to that's super helpful and really appreciated is just like give us a review. Subscribe, tell a pal, recommend us, pop in a group chat that you're on, that you're enjoying the podcast. Those things are super helpful as well, and we really appreciate them.
Yeah, I feel like we are growing slow and steady and gonna win the race.
Yeah. We're putting down roots. Leigh, I will see you next week.
Yes.
For more fun. Enjoy your holiday.
Thank you.
And bye y'all.
Bye, honey.
Bye.